Chapter 13. Salvaje lay on the whore's bed, watching the naked woman hang panties on the line strung across the end of the room. The apartment was a basic doll unit in a high-rise, and the hot wind from the open window rose from the floors below, carrying with it the stench of too many people crammed into too small a space. Cooked vegetables and sweat and broken toilets added their odours to the stink. The naked whore was pregnant, 7 months along, at least, and carrying a hefty fetus from her look. Her implant had failed, and she decided to have the baby. There was a nice market for healthy ones. People came down from the north who wanted a newborn without having to bear it themselves. She could get 6 months' pay, easy. Besides, she knew there were some men who found something appealing about pregnant women. Not what he found appealing, but something. Salvaje stared at her, an eagle watching a tasty mouse. The whore finished hanging her underwear up. She turned towards him. He was also naked. "Dios, is that all you're gonna do, is watch me? You don't wanna, let me do something for you?" She formed a circle with her hand and moved it as a man would if masturbating. Then she touched her lips with a fingertip, her pubic hair with the other hand. "No," he said. "I want to watch you, and I want you to tell me about how it feels to have a life inside of you." The whore shrugged. "It's your money." "Yes, it is. Come here." She moved towards him on the bed, sat. He put one hand on her belly, under a pendulous breast. "You know the miracle of carrying life?" he said. "It must be wonderful." She laughed. Oh yeah, it's wonderful, okay? My back hurts, my feet swell all up. I gotta go pee 12, 15 times a day and night. The baby kicks me so hard it almost knocks my pants off sometimes. Wonderful." "Tell me more," he said. He felt himself stirring. Yes, she carried nothing more than a bastard whose father was a paying customer. He doubted the whore even knew or cared who had put it into her. But even so, she was closer to knowing than he was. He envied her, and until the Messiah arrived, this was as close as he could come to finding out how it felt. She grinned at his erection. "Ah," she said, misunderstanding. "You want to know what it's like? Okay, I'll tell you. I'll make it good for you. The best." Later, as Salvaje reached the door to his own apartment, Pinder the technician slogged through the rain towards him. "Where have you been? I've been waiting here for almost a fucking hour." "I'll pay you for your time, don't worry." "My time is exactly what I am worried about," Pinder said. "Like, where am I going to be spending it if I get caught doing this? You're getting kind of famous, you know? The G-Boys have a monitoring team working to find you. Something is going on. Something more than the usual sweep for somebody doing pirate casts. What are you into here, Salvaje?" Salvaje opened the door, and the two of them moved in out of the rain. "They fear me," he said, "because of my message." "Rat shit," Pinder said. "There are 100 like you breaking into the nets every day. They preach about everything from pure water to group sex being the way to God. The TCC doesn't work up a sweat trying to run them down, but somehow you rate a full-scale investigation. They want you bad. I have been questioned." "And you told them?" "Nothing. You think I'm stupid? They can bury a man so deep nobody can find him again. But I want to know what I'm into here. Why are you so important?" "I told you my message." "Listen. No, you listen. You are nothing. You are an insect. The Messiah is coming. I am a tool of the incarnate God, and I will not be slowed by such as you. If you need something to fear, then fear me, technician. I have eyes and ears everywhere. And if you fail to serve me, there will be no hole deep enough to hide you from my retribution. Do you understand?" Pinder shook his head and started to turn away. Salvathe grabbed him by the shoulders, spun him around, and shoved him so hard the man fairly flew backward to slam into the wall. "Fuck! If you do anything to thwart my broadcasts, I will see to it that you die in a way more horrible than anything you can possibly imagine. Do you understand?" The technician's eyes went wide with sudden fear. Yeah, okay. It's just getting dangerous. That's all I wanted to say. It'll cost. I care not what it costs. The time is upon us. The message must continue. My organization is formed. I have hundreds, thousands who do my bidding without knowing who I am. But I need the message to go forth. Pinder stared at Salvathe. Salvathe felt nothing but contempt for the technician. He was weak, cowardly, fearing of things that had no meaning. The Messiah would have no use for such as this. None at all. On board the bionational ship K-014, somewhere in the no-when and no-where of hypershift, Massey spoke to his crew of androids. They were experimental models with short lifespans and were definitely expendable. The company had made up just this one batch with their particular modifications, and if word got out how they'd been altered, the company would have to do some fast singing and dancing to explain it. The androids could have been programmed with the mission before leaving Earth, but Massey was not one to take chances. By keeping it to himself, risk was minimized. You couldn't pry an answer from somebody who didn't have it, and Massey could snuff his own life if he were ever captured, leaving only questions. Massey stood in front of the holographic wall, images of the government transport ship Benedict floating just behind him. "All right," he said. "Here is our target. There are 5 main entrances, 3 emergency hatches, 9 service portals, counting the main bay. Our primary entrance will be the number 1 aft hatch here." He pointed at the shimmering image. "Secondary entrance in the event of blockage will be number 2 forward hatch here. Tertiary entrance will be the number 1 emergency hatch here." The androids watched, not speaking. "You will be armed with splatter guns for soft targets only. While these are trained Marines, we will have surprise on our side. They are not expecting us. Plus we have other ammunition in our arsenal. The crew and Marine survivors will be kept alive until we reach our destination, where we will likely have further use for them. Access the tactical computer for your individual assignments, full database assimilation by 0400 tomorrow. That's all." The android crew sat, still unspeaking. They were, Massey knew, up to the task. There was some risk of failure, a tang of spice as it were, but Massey did not doubt that he could overcome the slight chance. He had worked out the plan in the finest details. He had covered everything. He was the best there was at this kind of thing, and he would succeed. That was the point, really. Not the money he was paid, not the fortunes the company would make, not the deaths of the androids or the other crew. The thing was, as always, the challenge. This was perhaps the trickiest job he had ever taken on, and he intended that it come out as smooth as machine lube on polished crystal. Massey had but one goal, the same as it would always be: to win. Anything less would not do. Better to die than lose. He grinned. He wasn't ready to die yet, so he wouldn't. On board the transport ship Benedict, when the Marines came out of hypersleep, the surprise took a while to filter through to Stevens. Wilkes wondered if the man would have noticed at all had he not had a head count come out one too many. The squads picked it up right away. They all knew each other, so Billy stood out for them. But Stevens was a chair jockey. He had a list of his troops somewhere and couldn't yet identify them by names or faces. Wilkes watched the colonel frown at the numbers on his flat screen. "Sergeant Wilkes," Stevens said. "Sir?" "I've got a +1 on my roster." Wilkes thought about letting it slide, just to see, but he'd find out sooner or later. No point in putting it off forever. "Yes, sir. I brought an extra person, sir." Stevens blinked, as if still groggy from the chamber. "What?" "Sir, a civilian expert on the aliens." "What? Are you crazy? This is a top-secret military mission, Sergeant. I'll have your butt court-martialed. They'll put you in a pit so deep it'll take the ceiling light a year to get to you." Wilkes could feel some of the Marines smiling, but he didn't look to see which ones. He said, "Yes, sir." Stevens looked at the troopers, and Wilkes knew he was trying to figure out which one he didn't know, trying and failing. He stalled. "I told them you were unreliable. You could have screwed up this entire mission, mister. G-ship balances are critical at light-year jumps. An extra person could have thrown us off a parsec while in hypershift." "I balanced the weight, sir. I dumped 50 kilos of that raspberry-flavoured shit from the stores just prior to liftoff." Behind Wilkes, Bueller whispered to Easley, "Too bad. I like that raspberry-flavoured shit myself." "Shut up," Easley whispered back. "I am going to throw you in the brig and scramble the code," Stevens said, still looking for who didn't belong. Since they were all in robes over their sleep tights, there was nothing to give Billy away. A robe also covered her hospital clothes. As stupid as it was, Wilkes was amused that Stevens couldn't make her. Confirmed his opinion of the colonel. Time to flex a little muscle. "Sir, you could do that, but perhaps Gen staff might be interested in knowing why the CO didn't discover the stowaway before liftoff, given that a final inspection is part of the CO's duties, sir." Wilkes knew this was Stevens' first field command, and that he did not want anything to mar it, make him look bad. Now was the time for his pitch. "Sir, if I might have a more private word." Stevens was pissed, no doubt about it, but he had to be working the angles, trying to see how this was going to look once he got home. Since Wilkes wouldn't bet a bent demicred that he was going to get home, that didn't much matter to him, but Stevens wouldn't be thinking like that. Stevens turned and moved towards the aft wall. Wilkes followed him. Behind them, the squad stood at parade rest, watching and trying to hear. When they were far enough away, Stevens turned. His fury was unabated. "This better be goddamn good, Wilkes. Sir, if you could show that you were responsible for taking on a civilian expert, then there wouldn't be any problem. You buried a CMA code in your log, didn't you?" Stevens glared at Wilkes. If eyes were lasers, Wilkes would have been a crisp brown spot sizzling on the deck by now. Wilkes hadn't been able to check Stevens' CO log. The access commands for that were beyond his abilities as a computer break-in artist, but he was fairly certain that the colonel had installed a CMA, cover my ass, code, so that it was dated near the start of the mission. This was SOP among nervous officers, a simple piece of insurance that could sit there, unused, unless something wonky came up. It was easy enough. Log entries were all automatically timed and dated. A CMA code was some innocuous piece of input, usually a phrase that was related to whatever data was going in, but stilted in such a way that it didn't quite fit. If a situation arose that was unforeseen, the officer could use the code to cover himself by entering new data and then referring back to the phrase, as if it had been put there in anticipation of such happenings. Any lengthy phrase could be made to say almost anything a bright computer wanted later, and the officer could swear he or she had known about it in advance and covered it, but in code, so as to keep it secret from prying eyes. Suppose your cook was stealing supplies and selling them on the black market. You came up with a couple of 100 kilos short when you did an inventory. This would make a CO look bad. But if there was a code that said something like, "Suspect that cook is stealing supplies will allow him to continue to build case," then you knew you were on top of it, and what you did was justified in the interest of being certain. It was an old trick, one that shouldn't fool anybody who'd been in the service more than 10 minutes, but one bad officers still used. Wilkes was certain Stevens would have done it. Why should I help you? Because, sir, you'd be helping yourself. I'll put the rumour out that our discussion here is part of a clever subterfuge that you worked up for reasons of your own, having to do with some kind of secret military business about which they don't want to know. When we get back to Earth, you're covered, and I'll go quietly wherever you want me to go. Stevens considered it. He didn't like it. Wilkes could see that, but he was thinking about his future, and that was the most important thing on his agenda. "All right," he said. "Trot him out and let me see him." "See her," Wilkes said. "Where did you get her?" "I broke her out of a mental hospital, sir."